Hello, gamers, and welcome to another edition of Game Warp. I'm your host, as always, Elwood Jones, and I'm joined by my co-host, Miss Kim Lowe.
Hello.
First off, how have you been keeping, Kim?
Keeping good. I
That's good.
mean, it's been pretty busy. We did have our whole YouTube channel move, and that took a lot of time and a lot of energy over one weekend, and things are good.
Yeah, it's good now. We've obviously got our own channel. Before we were on the thatmomentin.com channel, and it was kind of like we had all this stuff, and it was just like clustering up the floor. So we've actually been given the time to just go off and build ourselves a shelf, and hopefully we'll get things a little more organized now. And we're looking forward to obviously bringing more content to the channel that before we didn't obviously have the space to do. So we're going to be doing more playthroughs, we're going to be doing more streams, and yeah, we'll just hopefully get some more reviews out there as well. So lots of exciting things to come obviously on the channel. So if you haven't done already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you've subscribed before, just make sure you definitely subscribed now to the new channel, and that way you never miss any of our upcoming updates. Today though, we are looking at our featured game for May, and that is the debut release from Tarsier Studios, and that is the game Little Nightmares. Now, Little Nightmares is another of Kim's finds. As we all know, she loves to find these bizarre and random independent games, and Little Nightmares, once again, is one of those.
Yeah, Little Nightmares is my most anticipated game of 2017, and we will definitely also talk about whether it was worth the anticipation after our chat. And as you always know, I always bring dark puzzle like platformers. And this one's 3D. It has a lot of stealth. And one of the main things that's really fantastic about it is the character that they built is this tiny little girl in a yellow raincoat who's called Six.
The plot of Little Nightmares, for those not familiar, it follows our little protagonist here, Six, who's a little 9-year-old girl, and she's trapped in this bizarre industrial landscape known as the Moor, and she's basically required to battle her way through it. She's got no ability to fight. The only ability she has is that she can run and hide, and she has a little lighter that she can illuminate the gloom with, but apart from that, she has to basically try and avoid everything that is essentially trying to eat her. And as she continues in this journey, it becomes ever more strange and surreal. As Kim pointed out already, it is one of our most anticipated games of the year, and myself, it was kind of a relief to find out that it didn't suck. Which is obviously always a bit of a concern whenever we have a game that we're built up in anticipation that it may not be worth it. And certainly with Little Nightmares, this brought back memories in many ways, the likes of Limbo and more precisely Inside. This would certainly be a great companion piece if you enjoyed either of those games. But, I mean, Kim, just opening thoughts on Little Nightmares. I mean, how did you find the game itself?
The game was really well paced. I think that's one of the best ways to say it, is that it isn't overly long. I feel like some people are going to complain about the length, as in like it is really only about a 4-hour kind of adventure. There are constant enemies, there are puzzles, there are stealth parts, and it has a really nice mix up because it's never really hard to solve, but it's mostly the idea that you need to be able to figure out the perfect way to pass through the level without getting caught, or through the multiple enemies, and really explore, because there are a lot of collectibles as well. Once you end the game, you start realizing these things that you're doing, like the checkpoints are, I believe the checkpoints are when you light the lamps. And usually if you find those lamps, you can light them and the checkpoints are there. And there are multiple parts. Like, I feel like the strength is really in the story and the character that they built.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, this is a story which contains no dialogue. It's a completely visual game, and it really falls again into that sort of visual sort of storytelling style that we've seen with the likes of Firewatch and Limbo. This is a game, while short in length, is both visually stunning and feels like it's telling a more complex and in-depth story than we would see in a game where you're looking at putting in 12 plus hours into. This is a very concise tale, and while it's certainly short, you don't feel by when the time you reach the ending that you've somehow been cheated out of any larger game experience. It feels a very satisfying and full experience, and I think it has a lot to do with the actual immersiveness of this world. As you start off in the basement and you work your way up into the kitchens and the restaurants before having your final confrontation with our main villain of the piece, known only as the Lady, who's this like masked geisha-like figure who is seen and hinted at throughout the game, and it all builds up to that final confrontation between the two.
Yeah, I mean, you bring a really good point because I think the atmosphere is what really pulls you in. It's so dark, and when you first get into it, I remembered having this feeling that I played about 45 minutes and I needed to take a break because it started to really like grab at me a little, where it was just so dark and so deep, and I didn't know what was going on. And then there was all these 3D controls, and there was it's different from inside, but then there are some scenes that really remind you, and then there's kind of like this looming soundtrack in the background that subtly really creates this. It's very unique, I find.
Okay. I mean, you mentioned the soundtrack there. If you actually buy the hard copy of this game, either for PlayStation or Xbox, you do actually get a copy of the soundtrack on CD. So I don't think it's like, well, I haven't actually sat down and listened to it, but just from playing the game, I can't imagine it's the sort of soundtrack that you would have on at like your dinner party or whatever you choose to have it. It's not like one of those soundtracks that sort of like jumps out at you or makes its presence known. It sort of highlights certain moments and really only comes into effect towards the end of the game that we really start getting those sort of key tracks on the soundtrack. Certainly with the final scenes of this game, the soundtrack really comes to the forefront and perfectly frames this fantastic ending that the game gives us. How did you find the soundtrack? I mean, did you find it sort of a little abstract, or did you think it was sort of perfect for the game that was there?
I thought it was perfect. It was very compelling, and I have music background myself, so I always listen to soundtracks, and I always really like to. These are those things that I really grab onto. And Little Nightmares was, I think that was part of the immersiveness. It was just every single sequence kind of had its own soundtrack, and those soundtracks would really highlight, say, that level and the people you were dealing with, like the villain that you were dealing with. And I think this is where I want to talk about, say, the character designs. They're kind of gloomy, but they're also very it's very messed up in its own way.
Yeah.
What did you think about monster design?
Oh, I mean, when we look at the creatures, these are grotesque and gelatinous creatures. They're really sort of, you get this idea that they're sort of been designed with the idea that they're going to emphasize the worst qualities of these characters. So one of the main themes of running throughout this game is this theme of gluttony. And certainly as we get towards the end and we see these grotesque, like bloated creatures, and they're just there shoveling food in their mouths and just sitting at these huge dining tables. And they will actually eat six if you're unlucky enough, which is kind of grotesque to see the fact that see these creatures and they're scrabbling to catch her at numerous points. There's several set pieces really sort of towards the end where you're running down hallways and you're being chased by this like wave of flesh as these characters are just trying to grab hold of you. And it's so perfectly paced when we have a set sequence that it feels like you're this character running away from these creatures. It doesn't feel like a level that's been designed that you're going to go to from point A to point B. It actually feels that you are this character and you are genuinely running for your life and that you're looking for that way to escape. And this is what the game provides. You can Often levels will give you numerous options. You can take sort of more stealthy routes and go use six's sort of size to hide under cupboards, or you can take the more bold route and just try and tiptoe past like a character to hope they don't notice. And certainly when six is being chased by one of these gigantic creatures, there's a heartbeat monitor that sort of pounds away in the background, and the closer that they are, the more tense the scene gets, the more it pounds away until they lose interest and then it slowly dies away, which is just such a nice touch and perfectly adds to the tension that these scenes have.
Yeah, I mean, the characters are fantastic in a way where first villain, like just to say, has like these ridiculously long arms and they can reach anywhere. And I think that that was one of the hardest parts in the game was at the beginning when you really needed to, think about this thing that can hear you, and you have to be, and it really emphasized that, your character had to be really certain that when you were playing six, that there was a lot of emphasis on when you snuck by and when to run and when to sprint. And it had these things that, in a quiet environment, say there was a part where we would turn on a TV or something to distract them. And it was constantly a lot of things that, a lot of strategies that had to be used a lot, but in different ways. And I felt that that was really creative.
Oh, definitely. So there's a real eye to the environments that Six has to travel through. These aren't just like randomly generated and generic sort of environments. Each location that she travels through is completely different than the next. There's no two particular locations that are the same. There's always something new to look at and something new to discover. And certainly if you're the sort of gamer who likes taking time to explore the environments, there's a number of wonderfully grotesque little touches. There's a room where you find that someone's hung themselves if you look upwards. There's a number of rooms which contain these little gnome creatures which Six can actually hug. And then they follow you around, which is always really nice. And just on we mentioned already about the lanterns. Now, one of the mini objectives in the game is to find all these lanterns or find these dolls, and just the hunt for these objects is fun in itself, and it never feels like these have been objects that have been like hidden in ridiculous places that you would never think to look. It's just they're there. You just obviously have to put in the time to explore, and the game obviously gives you the option to do that. And there's numerous scenes like where we're climbing like a stack of plates or like a stack of books or a bookcase, and you'll get so far up and like a book will tumble down, and they just have so much life to them. The environments, it's not that you're just climbing a static environment. At the same time, this is also where the controls also begin to let us down, as there's a number of locations where you're asked to do like a run and grab, and the controls just wouldn't feel responsive enough, or that the 3D environment, you wouldn't be able to tell Six's actual position in the environment, so you find yourself constantly falling off ledges that you shouldn't need to or shouldn't have to fall off, which was a little frustrating. So, I mean, in terms of controls, Kim, I mean, how are you finding the controls?
I actually felt exactly the same way. I think that that would be one of my biggest criticisms for the game, is that some of the controls felt that they lacked the responsiveness that they should have, especially that run and grab, the jump and grab thing.
Yeah.
There were certain parts where, you had to sprint through an area, like say that part you just mentioned about the diners swarming through you, and you had to jump at last minute through something. It was very inside-ish sort of idea, but I think one of the main issues is that the mechanic here is a little different. Most times when we have these things, our character will jump or they'll grab naturally. It's a platformer. Usually they still have some sort of autonomy to them. They'll do certain things themselves. But this one is like you have to jump and you have to grab and you need to sprint and you need to do all these things. So you're pressing 3 buttons with like all at the same time, and the stress of the situation really comes in. And then sometimes you're like, you just miss right past it because the 3D aspect is different. But I mean, the 3D has its also one of the things I think that I noticed that was an issue was the fact that in the beginning parts, some of the buttons that you were supposed to press and like certain things that cued what your character could do, it queued up very slow on like your tips on like, oh, say this area, press X to sprint. It didn't show up until like I ran a few times around that area, and then it finally was like, hey, you don't know how to do this, so I'm gonna show up now and tell you how to do that.
Yeah.
And it felt a little bit like there was a bit of a delay response. Hopefully that's just like something that they're gonna fix eventually, maybe in an update. It's a very minor thing, obviously.
It's a shame, really, because the game itself is very enjoyable to play. It's just when you encounter those moments where it feels like the controls are broken in a way. Certainly not to the point where the game is unplayable or that it makes you want to rage quit, but it's certainly frustrating enough that when you have to go for a particular tricky segment to be suddenly let down on the controls. And certainly it's often when you have these sort of letdown moments is when you've just completed a particularly tricky section, such as there's a scene where you're running across a dining room table and avoiding diners trying to grab at you, and the scene is so perfectly cinematic in the fact that you have objects falling off the table, you have wine bottles breaking, that to constantly be let down by this one jump because Six won't grab the damn wall, it just really took away from what would be like another standout moment, and it was just a little more frustrating.
And I mean, it didn't help that I think that the main thing with it is that every time they made the deaths, Six's deaths were so hard hitting. They would hit you and they would be so like graphic, and it was just like you can hear the sound design of kind of like her little body like breaking apart. And it was so heart-wrenching to play every single time she died, and it kind of made me hate myself a little whenever I felt like I let her down in a way.
Yeah.
And some of the I think this leads to one of like a minor issue I had with it, was that this goes back to when we light the lamps as a checkpoint. In the beginning, when you light the lamps, it actually doesn't hit you back onto the checkpoint itself, and it would hit you further back. So you'd have to run past like another 2 rooms. And I think that that's an issue in the sense that, after you've done that section like 10 times, I don't want to run past 2 rooms, which I don't need to do anything in. But like, and there's no particular danger in the next one. It's just a puzzle area, So I don't understand why like that was a lamp, but then I got reset backwards so far away. I don't know if there was a purpose to it. But it happened frequently in, say, the first 2 chapters. Whereas like, say when you got to like the 3rd and 4th and 5th, the final chapter, things, when you spawn next to your lamp. And I felt like there was some inconsistency there that wasn't polished.
The character Six, she is this adorable little 9-year-old. Although looking at her, you would think that she's not of the same world as these creatures that she's running away from. Yet, reading through obviously the notes that Tarsier Studios put out for the game, it's all supposed to be that that her and the other children that we encounter are all part of the same world, and that the lady and the chef and the janitor are all the same as Six. They're all the same, but due to her size, you would think that, she's like the gnome. She's a more fantastical element, but she's really not. Now, as we see her go through the game, she goes on this wonderful sort of journey as we see her start as one thing. So she starts off as this little girl, and progressively this darkness begins to overshadow the game. Six's journey, not obviously trying to avoid spoilers here, and we will, obviously after we give the rating, we will go a little more into the theories and the ideas of this game and do some more of the spoilers. But just Six's journey as a whole, how did you find it and the evolution of this character?
I think it was fascinating because it's just so hard to imagine who she is and what is her backstory. Like, why is she here? Obviously, like, the first thing we're going to understand is, say, well, she's captured and now she's trying to escape. But then you come to the point then, why did she have her own room? She had a bed. She wasn't in a cage. She kind of just woke up from a nightmare. And that was it. She woke up from a nightmare, and that's where our journey starts. And she walks through these things, and she's trying to get out. But what is she running away from? Like, does she know what's going on? I mean, if you were captured, you might not know what's going on. So there's a lot of questions surrounding her. And plus, on the fact that, there are these moments where, she's going to have these hunger pangs. And it's this odd moment in the game that it happens. And then you see her progress. And in that way, these things also have some sort of symbolism to them. Obviously, they get a little bit more like darker and darker as her character adapts to this world that apparently she comes from.
Like we saw with Inside, this is one of those games where, because we have no dialogue in this game whatsoever, and there is no clear story, there's no sort of narration or anything like that to tell us what's going on. It basically gives us these ideas and says, "We'll work this out yourself." Now, there is a prequel comic that is going to be coming out shortly, which will shed some more light on this world. Whether it's going to explain what's supposed to be going on in the world, it remains to be seen. But certainly, at the moment, I find ourselves in the same position we were when we were playing Inside, and we were trying to figure out, what does it all mean? What's the purpose of the boy? What does the blob mean? What does that ending mean? And with Little Nightmares, it's very much the same. We have this wonderful open ending that could obviously lead us into a sequel. It could just end there. That could just be the end of this story. And I think it's going to be one of those things with this game that people are going to enjoy talking about. They're going to certainly enjoy looking at the theories of and trying to piece together what it all means. And I think this is something that even when you play it through again, that you start to notice a lot of little things that you missed the first time. There's certainly a lot of Easter eggs hidden throughout, and it's so hard to try and talk about this game and not talk about spoilers. So we will certainly be talking about that after we get the rating, certainly. So
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. I think one of the best parts about this game is like I said in the beginning, it's paced really well. So in the beginning, everything feels really slow. It doesn't feel very it feels actually really hard and really difficult, and things are much slower paced. You're stealthing around, trying to not get caught, getting a grasp of the controls and all those challenges that you have. And as you progress in the last few chapters, things really pick up. You're heading more into chase scenes, you're heading more into stealth scenes, and your goals are so much more direct instead of being more puzzle based. And it also feels like the chapters go by much faster as you progress to the finale. The finale itself is definitely, like you said, something that we're going to have to talk about, because it is something that is just like, that was one of the reasons why, there are certain games that you can get a grasp of without really hitting the finale, and it's not going to make an impact. But as this game progressed, there was something so obvious about it, that there were so many things that not only inspired it, but also how the ending would really hopefully pull everything together, which maybe it did and maybe it didn't.
Yeah, I think you sort of really hit on the head there when you were saying, obviously, that it gets to a point where it suddenly starts picking up. And I think for myself, is once you get into the kitchens, so once you have the first couple of levels and where you're sort of in the nursery, and then you're being obviously chased by the janitor. Once we get into the kitchen, the game really sort of came into its own, and I think because it's a little lighter, it's a little less industrial. Once we get in the kitchens, we get a little more environment to look at, and there's certainly more fun set sequences, such as the scene where you're escaping from two chefs and you're using the overhead hook system to sort of escape past them, like a little miniature James Bond. When you get those set pieces, it really starts coming into its own. And with the first couple of levels, you're sort of learning how to play the game, you're learning the rules of this world, and it can seem a little bit of a downer, but it's one that you're best sort of sticking with it. If you get to the kitchen and you're still not enjoying it, then I don't think anything in the game is going to give you past that point is really going to change your mind. But I would hope that by that point you'd already be too hooked in it to want to quit, and you want to see how it ends.
So one of the things I really want to talk about is some of the inspirations. Obviously, we were talking about Inside off air. We already had determined that Inside is something that we can see so many parts of it in there. Like there are certain scenes that really, really reminds you of Inside, especially like when you're going through, passing through from one area to the next. You really see some set pieces which just look so much like Inside from the hue and the atmosphere and just that sort of sequence. But I think that one of the biggest things that I actually saw here was I don't know if you felt it, but there was seemed to be an inspiration from like Studio Ghibli.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly been a lot of mention of Studio Ghibli when we look at this film, and I think it's just the fact that it's this fantastical reference point, and certainly the fact it's got so much Japanese influence throughout it. Certainly the character, the lady, she's dressed as a geisha. And we could obviously look at the fact that she's wearing what would assume to be a Hanya mask at the same time. So there's certainly a lot of Japanese influence throughout, and I think that the idea when we look at the restaurant and it brings back so many memories of like a twisted version of Spirited Away, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
That we kind of want to link it to what Ghibli have obviously shown us already, but I feel that it's very much in its own world, and if we were looking at any sort of reference points, then we'd be certainly looking at like The Secret Life of Tom Thumb as more a closer reference point, certainly for myself. I think it has a lot to do with just the grotesqueness of these characters. These are very bloated and disgusting looking creatures, and say when we look at The Secret Life of Tom Thumb, then it matches very much that sort of bug infested world that we saw in that film. And with Ghibli, there's always this, while you may see demons and monsters, there's always sort of like a human sort of edge to them, and these are sort of very much the opposite ends. They're very exaggerated in their appearance. This is people really taken to the extreme. I mean, at one point I thought, oh, is this supposed to be like a representation of Dante's Inferno, and the fact that you're going through these layers and that you have to go through all the different sins. So obviously we got gluttony, we've got envy being sort of the clear ones that in representation, and certainly if we looked a little further, then we can obviously see other ones on there such as like sloth, and that could be obviously placed throughout. But that gluttony one, it just runs right through this game. If it was about anything, it's about the dangers of being a disgusting pig.
So obviously, for the sake of time, I have one more question before we hit the ratings, and I think that this will definitely affect how we rate the game. And since this is both of our most anticipated game, would you say it was worth the anticipation?
Oh, more than so. I feel that it was a game. At first I was kind of disappointed by the length when we had reports coming through that, oh, it's like a 2 hour, 3 hour game, and you're thinking, well, I've just spent £15 on this game and I'm only going to get like 4 hours gameplay. It feels like Firewatch in a way that I'm just kind of somehow being cheated. But when you complete the game, it feels like such a complete experience. You don't feel that the short runtime of the game really takes away. And certainly if we added any more to this game, the same with Inside, if we made Inside longer, would it add anything to that game? No, it would only take away from this world, and it would stretch what's already a good idea way too thin. So I think that it certainly plays to its strengths, and it stays in this sort of constrained runtime that gives us all these interesting ideas, and at the same time doesn't try to over-explain itself. So I was very satisfied with it. Yes, it has its problems, but this was still the experience I wanted from this game, certainly. And yourself?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that there was one moment where when I couldn't grasp the controls properly and the 3D environment was really throwing me off, that I started questioning this game a little in the beginning. But there's something so unique about it. The creativity and how they use certain, I guess it's just the world itself it has built is so pretty. It's so dark. It's so atmospheric, and it's so immersive. Like, I felt nervous going through certain parts when Six had to crawl through things and she had to go through these areas and she had to look for things and there were like little creepy things going on and you had to just avoid certain dangers. I really, really felt anxious with her, you know? Like you see her character, she looks so animated. It's like that feeling you get from Inside all over again. And yet somehow I don't know what it is, but I, despite the controls maybe not being as polished as Inside was, I kind of like Little Nightmares a little more. Maybe it's because I really identify with like Six and I really like her character design and I really like all the other character designs as well. Um, it's definitely I definitely say it's worth the anticipation. I think that it did a really good job. And plus in a year where we've been playing a lot of pretty disappointing games, it's nice to see that in April/May we're heading into some games that we're really starting to enjoy.
Oh, definitely. So for your rating, I mean, what are you going to give this out of 5?
I'm gonna give this 4.5 out of 5.
Okay.
How about you?
I think for myself, I'm mostly going to give it 4.5. The point 0.5 for myself, the thing which distracts most from the game is the fact that it does at times feel like you're playing an interactive movie rather than a game with any sort of challenge to it. Yes, there are challenging jumps and the occasional puzzles as where things must go, but this isn't the sort of game that's going to keep you awake at night trying to figure out how you do certain sections. Everything has a very logical way to it, and it's very much, when we have puzzles, it's very much go fetch style puzzles rather than pulling levers and setting up a chain of events to actually complete puzzles. So certainly in the puzzles terms of things, it does get let down, but certainly in the immersive environment, it's certainly got everything going for it. And certainly with the story, I've found a very enjoyable story here, and a character that I would like to see go on. I would like to see more of this character.
Ratings are done, and we're going to head straight into right now. If you haven't played the game, here will be theories and whatnot, and there will be more spoilers than before, so you might want to come back after you play the game. So, theories. What did you make of the ending, and what did you make of, how did you feel about what the story was really about?
Well, I think, obviously, if we're looking at what the moor is, this environment, we obviously start down in the nursery. And this is where we're obviously introduced to Six. And we get the first idea of what the moor is. And basically, over the course of the game, we discover that it's essentially this offshore restaurant where the rich and the gluttonous can come and sort of satisfy their need to just constantly eat and devour everything. In particular, we are shown that at the moor they are basically either breeding or kidnapping children to use as a food source. So while the children are initially nurtured, they're given toys and a place to sleep. Once they get old and fat enough, then they're basically put into cages and carted off to the kitchen. And this is essentially where we join Six. Now, through her journey through the moor, we obviously see the ins and outs of this operation. We go into the kitchen, we see what's happening there. We see these passengers coming off the boat, and obviously see them sitting at the dining room tables and just continuously eating. I mean, even in the kitchen scenes, we see what exactly goes into the sausage. Which will be something we will discuss a bit later, until we obviously battle our way up to the confrontation with the lady. This, as we mentioned earlier, she's this geisha-esque figure, and when we go into her bedroom towards the end of the game, there are actual pictures of Six that can be seen on the floor. There's lots of broken mirrors, and we get this idea that the lady is somehow disgusted with her own appearance, and that Six is in fact her daughter, who she's cast down into the basement to be served up, served up with as the other children as a meal, as a what we can only assume is really like a form of jealousy for her. Something that was only sort of driven more by the fact that she's obviously wearing this mask. It ties in with the Hanya of Japanese folklore, these women who were jealous, and that they would actually, their jealousy turned them into sort of like horrific demons, or these very doll-like mask-wearing women, if we look at obviously Japanese performance theatre. So certainly those themes seem to be like forever present throughout, and for myself that seemed to be what it's about. You're basically six and you're uncovering what's going on there, to finally obviously have the showdown with what we can assume is Six's mother.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think that the story itself is pretty twofold, in the sense that in one way we're seeing the operation on this boat kind of thing, but at the same time we also get an idea that maybe this sort of event is not all the time. Maybe I don't know. I mean, it felt like, because as the game ended, we kind of had this image that it was like, it felt like they were leaving, or maybe whatever was leaving, there was like a sound of a ship or something. Because I don't know if you waited until the end of credits, but by the end of the credits, you had like this, she was just standing there by herself on an island, like where she got out from. And it felt like, that was definitely not the boat. I don't think that was just an island. Yes. Or that was like the Maw Island, right? But then where did the boat because I think one of the parts is that there was a scene from one to the next where we were climbing up a boat, and this is where we started seeing the guests and we started seeing all that sort of thing. So I wonder if this is a long story, but I think that on one side that's like the restaurant and all those things, but on the other side I think one of the most fascinating things is really like, as you're walking up to see the lady for the first time, as you're walking up the stairs into her quarters and stuff, there are a lot of pictures on the walls. And if you really look at those pictures, there are pictures of, say, there was one picture in particular that caught my eye, and that was a picture with 5 people in it. And it felt like one of them was the lady. And I think that might be saying that, in a way, that this kind of reinforces either that Six is her daughter or Six is something. But it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and she's called Six. So they're related in some certain way. That's why we get that name. I really don't know. I find this story really weird, because in the end, I think that one of the main things that I tried to avoid talking about too much in our main review was the fact that Six progresses in, say, her hunger. So she went from, eating normal, like kind of like just normal food, and then she progressed till the final part where she pretty much ate her mom. If you call her mom, she ate the lady.
Yeah.
So there was one moment that, these scenes are just so shocking, and then you wonder, what is the nature of Six? Is there some sort of cannibalism in that sort of concept, or is it for survival, or I don't know, and there was even one part of me which was like, well, is this trying to be like, because Bandai Namco is also releasing Code Vein, and Code Vein is about vampires. So I was like, is she a vampire or something? But then, you kind of had this idea that as she bit into the lady, that there was like a soul release, like everything from this entire maw seemed to come to life, and it just went into the little body of Six.
I think in terms of Six's unusual eating habits, when we initially see her, she's obviously lured into a cage because she's attracted by raw meat. We obviously see her eat a rat, and as it progresses, you said, she sort of eats more and more bigger and living things. Her taste becomes more unusual. The one that really shocked me is that it's about, I think it's like the 4th hunger pains that she has. And you encounter a gnome, and he offers her a sausage, and instead she eats the gnome.
Yeah.
And part of me thought that, well, she ate the gnome because she needs to eat, and she knows what's in the sausage, so she isn't going to eat the sausage because sausage is made of children. And consumption of the lady would be really because it's her way of taking revenge on her mother that she chooses to feed on her mother, and the fact that she gains her mother's power, because we've obviously shown throughout that fantasy that her mother has obviously got all this great power, and Six ultimately takes that power by consuming her mother and unleashes it on the guests of the Moor. Now, you obviously said that you weren't sure, obviously, about what the Moor was. I mean, the Moor itself, while we obviously see the big lighthouse structure at the end, which is like the top, we obviously start below, and I got the idea that it was like this subterranean facility, so it's under the ocean where we start, all like the basement and the kitchen, and as you go further up, you end up in the dining rooms, which obviously in the main lighthouse part. So, and I don't know if you actually noticed it when Six actually feeds in the game. You can look to the side and you will see a shadowy version of Six, so like a dark Six. And this isn't like a shadow or something, because it's there 1 minute and then it vanishes. And this only appears whenever you do a feeding scene. So if you feed on like the rat or you pick up the meat, as she's feeding, you can look off to the side and you can actually see a dark Six. So it's a Six in silhouette, which I'm still not sure what that's supposed to represent. Whether that's supposed to be like the dark side of Six that's ever in threatening to sort of like embody her, because as we see Six go on this journey, she becomes all the more dark as it goes on. So she starts off, as I said, this innocent little girl who hugs gnomes. By the end of the game, she's eaten the gnome. So it's this real evolution of darkness we see this character go on, yet we still feel very attached to this character.
I think that the moment that she eats the gnome brings a sort of question to us where who is the Six, and what is her journey? Like, why would she eat that? Obviously, like, I think you make a fair point that she knows what's in the sausages and she doesn't want to do that. But then at the same time, is it for survival, or is it the fact that she's adapting to the environment that she is walking through right now? Or maybe it's like you said, that I didn't notice the darker Six. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a second run of this game for sure. I want to kind of go back and unlock some more of the collectibles and whatnot. But I mean, like, when you think about it that way, it feels like there is also one point that she's probably adapting to her environment, and that's why she's becoming like, she's trying to survive. But then these gnomes have been helping her the entire way, and it doesn't make sense that she would eat them.
I think it's more just the fact that she's overcome when she has these hunger pangs. That she's willing to do whatever it takes to relieve them. Because we see that when she has hunger pangs and she can't run, she's like pretty much doubled over in pain, and she's willing to do whatever it takes to relieve these pains. And I think certainly when we have the scene where the gnomes offering the sausage, it makes sense that she doesn't eat the sausage because of, as we said already, she knows what it contains. Yet she has to eat, so the only option is to obviously eat the gnome, which shocks us because these gnomes are adorable little creatures that kind of remind us of Pyramid Head from Silent Hill, except really tiny.
I think that. I honestly think that one of the best things is the fact that she's so tiny going through these big environments. And it's hard to imagine that she's actually in this whole world, that she's, the geisha, if it's her mom. I mean, she's like this 9-year-old girl. She's like so short compared to, if that's really her mom, like that lady is super tall,
Yeah.
I mean, there's also I think that, the lady, one of the things is that the lady and the broken mirrors had a lot of story behind it too. I don't know. I feel it's a game of observation. Like when we do a second run, we can actually really look at the decor and, especially in the ladies' quarters, slowly look through the pictures and really, get a grasp of the things that are going on.
Yeah.
But I don't think there will ever be a clear answer. Because I think Tarsier Studios already said that they do want the story to remain open-ended.
Yeah.
And for theories and people to interpret it the way that they feel. I think one of the more interesting things is that I think I just want to bring up before we wrap this up is that I have been watching some playthroughs after I finished and looking at some other theories that people were having. And one of the most interesting ones was in the beginning sections, there was a lot of imagery that I'm going to give credit to them, of course. It's Bowling Otter Show. They're YouTubers that are playing through this game right now. And one of the things they brought up was an imagery of just the shoes and the suitcases and stuff that reminded them of the Holocaust. I don't know if you had that feeling.
Oh, I could certainly see that. It's certainly not what I was thinking of when I was doing this playthrough. I mean, as I said, there was so much to take in on this playthrough. I mean, we only have to, like, when we look at the kitchen, if you pay enough attention to the chefs, you actually see that they appear to be wearing masks. That
Exactly.
they have faces underneath these like grotesque sort of what we see into their faces.
Exactly, because you have these parts where they're kind of picking up, when they're cutting the meats, they're pulling pieces of the meat out and they're stuffing it under their masks and they're feeding themselves like that. I think they're not like, it's very obvious that those are masks. And yeah. I think that that's really important because the geisha herself has a mask. And when you even look at our first villain with the long arms, the janitor, his mask as well. His face is covered. He has no eyes. He can't see. He's blind pretty much. So, all these things, there's just so much imagery to this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously now you mentioned about the Holocaust imagery with like the suitcases and the shoes. I mean, we assume this is to be from the children that they've kidnapped to serve up at the morgue. This is their belongings, or
yeah.
We could obviously say, is this the guess that she cons them in with the idea of that you get to eat and be merry, and then does she get them fattened up and serves them to the next set of people? I don't know. I mean, who do these shoes belong to? There's certainly enough of them. There's certainly when playing the scene where we're waiting for the shoes and we see the creature underneath sort of coming towards you, sort of like creating that tidal pattern that brought back two things. First of all, the setting of the scene, it reminded me of the trash compactor scene from the original Star Wars, when we've obviously got the creature in there, and the other one, obviously, when we see that wave coming, it kind of reminded me of Jaws in the way, and especially in the fact that you're constantly going from suitcase to suitcase, trying to get out of the shoes as quickly as possible, unless you risk being dragged under. But of all the things that we see throughout the game, the thing which creeped me out the most is those damn leeches. The leeches creeped me out so bad.
I do have to say that I really do say that the first part of the game had it didn't have a lot of imagery, but it did have a lot of creepiness to it.
It's a game that rewards another playthrough. Certainly there's enough things to find, such as like the dolls and the lanterns that are scattered throughout the levels, so there's always the objective of finding those. And even just when we obviously look at the achievements in this game, and it says when you like complete the kitchen, it's like, oh, you've got 50 gamer points for the kitchen, and then the description is like, the chefs will miss you. So even in its achievements, there's a real sense of playfulness to this game that they're clearly trying to create this world. Even in its achievements, it's all about keeping you within this world and putting you solely within the body of this this hungry little 9-year-old.
Yeah. Well, I definitely hope they either do some sort of like expansion of like DLC or something like that, because it's an interesting story. I mean, Six is a fantastic character. So obviously those are our theories and what we thought about the game in general. So this wraps up this episode. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. We'd love to hear your feedback and any recommendations that you have for us. Head over to our home base, thatmomentin.com, to read more gaming reviews. To get gaming news and releases every single day, follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook at Game Warp Podcast. And you can hang out with us on our Twitch channel where we stream at Game Warp Podcast. Till next time, bye.